Love is the greatest gift we are ever given. It brings us purpose, joy, connection, and life itself. Yet because we love, we also open ourselves up to the immense pain that comes with loss. Indeed, I believe that the greater our love, the more intense our pain during the loss and grieving process. And although love lives inside us and around us, even when our loved ones have passed on or moved on, grief can teach us how to love more fully while also letting go. Today, we'll focus on this listener's real life question. My partner and toddler died last year in an auto accident. People keep giving me the message that I should be able to move on by now, but I can't. I went back to work after 3 months, but I'm still just going through the motions. My mom and sister are worried and try to help, but I feel dead inside. What can I do to get over the grief? And with that question as the focus of today's episode, I'm Dr. Carla Marie Manley, and this is Imperfect Love.
Welcome to Imperfect Love with Dr. Carla Marie Manley, psychologist, author, and relationship expert. I'm here to help unravel mysteries and misconceptions about love, relationships, and mental health issues, plus everything in between. Love is complicated, people are not perfect, and relationships surely can be tough. Together, we'll navigate this messy, imperfect space of real life.
Today, I'm joined by a very dear and special guest, Mark Ed, who will be sharing his expertise on love, loss, and grieving. Welcome to the podcast, Mark. It is such a joy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor to be with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing your love with me and our listeners today. Before we launch in to the podcast, could you tell us just a little bit about what makes you you?
What makes me me is, I think, all of the experiences that I have had, uh, things that have happened to me, things that I've overcome. And I mean, I am a different perfect person than I was 2 years ago, but so it's an ongoing process. But I think what makes me want to keep going is love.
Isn't that the truth of it? That love is definitely what keeps us going. So I know a bit about you. You are an artist, a prolific artist. You are an author. You are an amazing musician. You are a husband, you are a father, you are a son. You also have written a beautiful book which you illustrated on grief. So that's a little bit about what I know about you, yet I know you are so much more than your accomplishments and all of, oh, and you're also, as if you need another profession, you're a hairdresser. So I can't wait for the day where I get my hair done by you. I'll fly back. My hope is someday. And anyway, so with all of that background, and even know, just pausing for a minute, the people who do our hair, right? Whether it's cutting our hair or giving it, a blow dry, whatever it is, they are such reservoirs of
Yes, yes, indeed.
holding. Yeah.
As I have been in that industry for 40 years, and it is amazing how the time has gone. And I see the styles repeat, but the stories are so fascinating and interesting with all of my clients. And it seems to be a place where clients have fallen asleep getting there. It feels so good, and but they tend to tell you everything of their whole life story, and all you're really concerned with is doing a good job on their hair. But it is quite a very close relationship with the client because you're making them feel good about themselves.
Absolutely. And I imagine in that role where you are that receptacle for so many memories, thoughts, feelings, experiences, I imagine just on that level alone that you've listened to so many tales of loss,
Oh,
loss
yes.
of the physical person, loss through death, loss through the ending of a relationship. Ending of
Yes.
a friendship, ending of a marriage, ending of a job, all of those things bring us loss and grief.
Right. And what can I say? I, in my heart, I say a prayer um, for uh, whatever's to happen will happen, whether it's what they want or what they don't. But it only brings me in closer to these clients as actual being living souls that are connected to me. I believe we're all connected. And by lifting someone up and not condemning another, I believe that you're really helping yourself. I believe that a lot of the components that come with joy are things like helping and helping each other. It makes watching a sunrise, watching nature, but also that helpfulness gives you a sense of purpose, and it kind of completes a joy that a lot of times people think that it's just uh, all about pleasure and happiness. But I think it really comes from very deep place in your soul that you have to engage, and it is like joy is something that is just waiting to be tapped into, that you have to really, like love, make a choice.
Absolutely. And when we look, let's just pivot for a minute. I agree with you on joy. It's there, it's waiting. I see it as this flame inside of us that's just sometimes it gets a little obscured. Sometimes it gets a little smaller because we're in pain and we're grieving, but it is there. And when we look at this listener's question, and let's
Yes,
dive into grief now, which
yes.
is the antithesis of joy. And when we lose someone, we
Oh,
lose that relationship. And let's talk about this listener's
yes.
question now.
Well,
And that
I will tell you, 17 years ago, I was blessed. Well, I should actually start from the very beginning in 1989. That so I would be more like 34 years ago. I was blessed with a beautiful son. His name was Ezra, and Ezra was one of my three boys, the youngest. And he had red hair. He was a fireball. He had so many friends, and he was very athletic, a snowboarder, loved to play. And I was also blessed with a wife of 23 years that really, if it was snowing, she would say, Mark, I'm taking the kids out of the school. We're going sled riding. We're going skiing today. And I said, that's fine. And just write the note to the teacher, they'll buy their business. But when Ezra was 15 years old, he was diagnosed with a very serious condition called Ewing sarcoma. And I was just in shock. I and our lifestyle, Deborah and me, was more like living at the Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh, and it was a very tough go with radiation and chemo. And even to this day, Carla, I cannot have a very hard time watching St. Jude commercials of children with cancer and the struggle that they and the parents go through, because I was in denial that my son would ever die. I never, ever thought he would die. I always believed in God that he would be saved. And unfortunately, he died when he was 17 years old. And that was 17 years ago. 2 years after his death, my first wife died. And it was a kind of a double whammy. And I was really not having any reason to live. My other sons, Elijah and Mantra, were old enough to be on their own. And I really, the news was laughable. The world was laughable. There was no meaning. I thought I really had no reason to live. And although I was not suicidal, I didn't really care if I lived or died. I absorbed myself into music, uh, into the piano, and I absorbed myself into my artwork. And curiously enough, there was an art show in, it was around 2012. Um, and, Debbie, of course, had passed in 2009 and Ezra in 2007. And I lived in a mansion that I completely was a shell. And the only thing that was there was a St. Bernard and myself, and 5 fireplaces and over the top, and filled with all of their memories, that I felt that I would betray them if I gave them away or if I didn't take care of them, when actually it was just stuff. It was just stuff. I would say the tolerance of living just came from people checking in and really meaning that they cared. They cared. But the truth for me of the grieving process was, the more I loved them, the more I grieved. And I said something like, grief is the price you pay for love. And I was angry at God or the divine a little bit. But then I realized that the ability to love and be loved, I did not conjure up. It did not come from me. It came from beyond. And it was given to me. And I was allowed to experience that. I was allowed to have 17 years with a son. I was allowed to love and permitted to share a relationship. And that was very special, you know. And how can I be angry for something that I was just allowed to do and chose to do, you know? But I, there were times, and still today, for at any given moment, anniversaries are very tricky, but because you could feel them, they're coming, and you're setting yourself up. But I have believed that the celebration of that relationship, or the celebration of that time spent with that loved one, the celebration of the life and what it meant to you and what you learned from that, and what we still are learning, was real good. Well, Was it Shakespeare that said it is better to love and lost than to
Never have
have not
loved
loved
at all. Yes.
Yeah. Is
And
does that does that correlate? But we are also, as I hope, to be helping other people that might have questions about it. I feel useful in it, and I am always drawn to parents that have lost children. I think it is the worst thing in the world. It is not natural. It's not supposed to happen like that, and it happens many different ways. And I am always interested because grief is an individual process. It is, it, it's like a fingerprint. Everyone has different ways of grieving. It was like when I was at my prior job that I had to leave because it was you you start caring for yourself and say, I need this, I don't need that, you know. But people would come up to me and say, Mark, how are you? I mean, really, how are you? I mean, really, Mark, really, how are you?
mm,
And it was it was like walking around with your arm cut off, or you say, how do you think I am? I am. I'm not walking. I'm crawling. I'm trying just to crawl. I can't even walk. You know. But now, Carla, this was 17 years ago, and I'm able to talk about it. I
yes.
could probably not talk to you for more than 1 minute if it was a year ago. I wouldn't know what to say.
My dear Mark, I first had no idea. So I'm on the other side of the camera crying as I'm hearing your story. On the other side of the recording, for those of you who don't see the visual part of it, but it's the picture that you paint and the soulfulness with which you paint it, the Tennyson quote you were talking about, it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. It's a beautiful quote, but when you're in the thick of the grief, it doesn't actually ring true at all. It
No,
doesn't
no, it
it
doesn't.
doesn't ring true.
Yeah,
And so hearing your tale of losing your son at the beautiful age of 17 when his life, you know, that adult life ought to just be
yeah.
beginning, and then your wonderful partner, it's so sad that I paired you. It's appropriate. I had no idea of that background story when I paired you with this question. And so I all the more appreciate, because we were, going to talk about your grief book, your book on grief that is about a mother and a son. I had no, you
Yeah.
know, or a mother and the child. I didn't, so I had no idea of the depth of the background story. And I so appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to to share with us, because you're right. I've never lost. I've definitely lost people that I care about very deeply, like my mother and my sister. But to lose a child, I can't even imagine.
It
Can
is, it's a thing. And every single day you think about him. But to me, if I can state the way I really feel, is he is no longer my son. He feels like my brother,
mm,
an older brother, just like my mom. I happen to have my mother who is she's celebrating her 104th birthday, but she is not my mom anymore. She's like a sister. And I I get the our relationship goes on, and I'm blessed. I'm blessed. I was at the when it happened, and the grief, and when that happens, you nothing else matters, and I don't know. I think I slept a lot. I didn't have and I know the funeral, it was 2 days because with younger people, they tend to have many friends in high school.
Mm.
He had 4 high schools that he would associate with. It was 2 nights, 2 nights of a viewing. They were worried about me holding on to him, not wanting to let go in the casket. It's a very weird place to be. It's a it's a it's a horror story. It is. It's a horror
Absolutely.
story. But
Absolutely.
by the grace of God, I I have made it. And we're allowed, there's there's hope after grief, if you can say that. There is hope. And and grieving also, is it an emotion? In grief, an emotion?
Yes, grief is definitely one of
You
our
know, it's one of
feelings.
those emotions that you're so sad and you're so vulnerable and you're so helpless and hopeless, and it's probably the opposite of like um, an emotion like anger when you are, and
There's so much passion to it, and
you
when
know
it comes to grief, it's like walking through mud, whereas joy and love are sunshine and light. Grief feels to me like walking through thick mud that's just covering you, and you
yeah,
can't, and that, as you say, you're lucky if you can crawl through it.
yeah, yeah.
Yes,
And if you do, Carla, I don't know, it has to make you stronger and accept, and at least I empathize and I have compassion for other people so much. I truly, from my soul, am able to give from whatever I have to them that were once like me, that could not believe it, you know.
absolutely. And I think I wish I could say that I agree that it makes us stronger. And I understand that perspective. I almost feel as if grief, in some ways, at least for me, made me weaker, more
Yeah,
human, more fragile, more susceptible, yet also more resilient. So I guess I do see the connection to strength, but I almost wonder if grief has ever made me stronger or
I,
if just more aware of my
right. Yes.
humanity.
Now, also, I wanted to bring up the point of I had the privilege of holding my son's hand as he died. And many parents do not have that. Many parents don't have last last moment. Many times children die in so many different ways. But he was in a hospital bed. And I do want to share with you that the it had not snowed and he loved to ski. And it was January 25th when he left this earth, and at 3:30 in the afternoon. And I said, I held his hand. I said, Ezra, please don't ever leave me. And his eyes were open. He looked at me. I'll never leave you, Dad. I'll never leave you, Dad. And then he said, the music is so beautiful. The music is so beautiful. And his hands turned cold as stone almost immediately, cold as stone. And it started snowing, and it would not stop. It kept on snowing and snowing. 3 days later, when they had the funeral, I was outside in the snow in my backyard, just being alone. And I think I was smoking a cigarette. And I saw a monarch butterfly
In winter.
light right. in the white snow on the rock before me
In the winter, in
in the winter.
Pennsylvania, in
And
Pennsylvania.
yeah,
That's not the norm.
and it stays. I I want I think I want to tell you, grief never goes away. It never ever goes away. And it's always there.
I I agree with you, Mark, and I will go back to the listener's question in just a minute, but it's a perfect opportunity because when I work with people around grief, they're always seeking closure, always seeking closure. And I say, I don't know who came up with that concept of closure, and it doesn't really matter to me, but I don't believe in closure because to, especially surrounding grief,
Yeah,
right? When we love someone that deeply, as which is what love is, it's, this deep connection,
yeah,
it may get softer. The mud may become less muddier. We may start seeing again and feeling the light again and the air again. But as you said, the anniversaries, a smell in the air, a certain food, a color, a picture. And yes, it gives us pain, it gives us heartache, but at the same time, if we didn't have those occasional glimpses of pain, of heartache, of that music stirring us, and that, song saying, we go, oh, that person loved that song. My,
yes,
loved one adored that cake or whatever it is. So I think the fiction of closure around grief keeps many people thinking that they are broken or wrong, when I agree with you. True love, once we've lost, again, whether it's a relationship, a person to death, it when that sense of loss is evoked in us and that pain, that is a sign that
yeah,
we loved well and deeply and truly.
yes, yes. And it also leaves word for a word, anticipation, because as we grow, we naturally change, and grief changes. And you know, it's I think there's a million things, that we just don't understand, but they happen for a reason. They just happen for a reason. And I simply don't understand it all. But I can say this, if you make it through it, you're blessed. You are blessed. And if you make it through it, and I was talking to my wife this other time of all of the bad times that have happened. She incidentally lost her husband, who was an artist. And it was 2 years after my first wife died. And we never knew each other. We never knew each other in this small city. And when we are hoping, no, wait, I know I was digressing. What was I
It's
talking?
okay. You were taking us into the gift of anticipation.
Yes, because always something, it changes, and something can happen. You don't know how your life is going to change and how that will work in to help others again, you know. And I think it's one of those things that, I mean, this may sound very, very silly, but it it, it took me 2 weeks to grieve the loss of my Saint Bernard, my dog. 2 weeks at least. And you wonder, this is a pet and stuff, but it was very, very real to me.
Oh,
Very, very
absolutely.
real, you know. And there's times that uh, you'll see someone else's pet getting old and not and knowing it doesn't have that much longer to live, and you'll feel sad. You feel, you know, I
Certainly,
agree. you know?
certainly.
And
Uh,
why is this feeling? Does it make the joyous times more joyous? Does it the green greener and the red redder? I don't know, but it's a part of life that we have to accept and not be afraid of, but it is definitely painful. It's painful.
Oh, and sometimes I agree with you. Sometimes painful is not even enough to describe it. And when you're talking, I know so many people, me included, where when you lose a pet, and I think of my first Great Dane, Bentley, when I lost him, it was one of my first adult experiences.
Right?
In fact, my first adult experience of deep, heavy loss. And it
Yeah.
was crushing. It was crushing, it was immobilizing. And because our pets they give us unconditional love. They give us companionship. They are our best friends. They don't judge us. So of course, when you lost your Saint Bernard, especially on the heels of everything else, it
Right.
would be one more
Yeah.
crushing loss.
Yeah.
I'd love to pivot back to our listener's question because
Oh, but
I'm
I
sorry.
remembered with Cindy, her husband, of course, died in a car accident. And when that was the attraction, because she had lost a spouse,
Mm,
that was the attraction to me. That was just like it's an attraction that if a parent loses a child, I want to talk to them
mhm.
about that. I do, because I don't know. I know everyone feels differently about it, but and some parents don't have the same kind of relationship with their children that I was blessed to have. You know, this was one that was the baby that could do no wrong. That was the love of my life, you know. And it is it's funny because I could hear his voice, and but I don't know. I could not I could not be smiling if it wasn't like 17 years ago. I've learned a lot through all those weeks and all those months of therapy and great thought. But excuse me, what were you saying?
No, absolutely. That so many people, and this does take us directly to the listener's question about it's been a year and people are expecting her to be over it or through it or to be
No,
on with
you
her
never get
life.
over it. You never get
No,
over it.
no, you
No,
might.
you are able to talk about it without breaking down, and without and being you're able to articulate your words, and you are able to explain the story, but you never ever get over it because it was too much. And wondering why does not do any good. The things that do good for me are remembering and cherishing those times, helping other people that might be in that thing, listening to music, and really watching nature and learning it, listening to the birds, doing things that put you in a place of total surrender to that relationship that you had, and that will you make you able to breathe and take a deep breath, that those kind of things. But or you have the choice of really, and don't take me the wrong way, Carla, but really kind of dramatizing how bad everything was and remembering how terrible and how rude and awkward and ugly and it you have that choice also to
I
do.
hear you, and I think especially if it's a relationship that you're closing the door on, or a physical death. For some people that works as a way of leaning in to the darkness. Me, I happen to be more of a fan of leaning into the light
Yes.
because that's the kind of light and energy I like to remember is the
Well,
beauty.
it dispels the darkness,
It does, and I'm a big fan of leaning into the light, and I'm hearing you say that helping others, when you have the bandwidth to do that. I know so many people who have lost someone and they immediately want to go and be on hospice, and the hospice teams say, "Wait a year. Wait a year if you
right?
still want to do this." So I'm a believer in everything you're saying. Diving into creativity, letting that creative muse take you to another place, using the power of music. Help.
Traveling to new places, traveling to completely new places,
Yes.
um, you know, pursuing your dreams, you know.
Yes. All of those things that are distractions, and it can be a new place that's a half hour away or, a
Yeah,
plane flight away. And I also am a big fan of, I remember when I lost my mom in my morning walks, I would devote my walks to allowing myself to cry because I had to be strong during the days. I had to really be there for the people in my life. And my morning walks, if my being wanted to cry and
right,
I was all by myself out on that path, I would cry and cry and cry
right.
until I had truly had no tears.
There was no more.
And
And
so
it's funny. I swim, and I said no one can see me cry
mm,
when I'm swimming. No
mm.
one can see me because I have goggles on. But it was, and it's important to do that. You have to get that out of your
Absolutely. And I remember one time I saw someone in a supermarket who looked like my mom. It was over a year since she had passed, and I walked up and just because I wanted to look at her almost to see if it was my mom. I knew it wasn't, and I started crying and I said, "I'm so sorry." And I said, "You reminded me of my mom." And she tapped me on the shoulder. She says, "It's okay, dearie. I understand." And
oh,
so I think that we don't necessarily want to go crying all over the place and being, you know, scaring people because we're now, walking around
right.
in this constant state of grief, but we don't want to be afraid and we don't want to feel as if we have to put on a happy face. Maybe we don't want to be crying 24/7 out in public, but it's okay for us to not put on a happy face. And for
Yeah.
those who are not in the grief with us, I think it's so important that we allow people their time and their space, not to get over the loss, not to pretend it didn't happen, but to move through it at their pace and to support them. And instead of saying you should be over it or you should be dating or you should be this, it would be more like, what do you need? What
Yes.
would you, and gentle invitations. Would you like to go on a walk today? Would you like, to come out to dinner with me? And not giving up on that they may
No.
say no for weeks and weeks on end, or maybe a year, 2 years. And to be, I think it's one important way to support people. And when we look at our listener who has lost a partner, lost a toddler, coming home to this space. Thank goodness her message says she has a mom and a sister who are supporting her. But to realize and not to stress herself that that grieving process, her place right now of going through the motions, congratulations. That
Right.
she is able to go, that's progress right there. To be able to go through the motions is
Yes.
progress. And I would also think if she were able to find the bandwidth to join a grief group or individual therapy, that grief groups, I know so many people who have actually met, not that she's ready for a new significant other, but who
Right.
have met long-term friends and
Oh
even
my, yes.
partners in grief groups.
This is why it's so important because I was just going to be there's, a lot of times people that lose loved ones think it's their fault.
Mm.
or there's a whole different, you know, my situation was, it was cancer, and it was, took me completely by surprise, you know, but there's many times that in situations it's not that same way. It could be a gunshot, it could be a terrible fatality, car crash, you name it. One of the things I want to say before it ends is, when Ezra was, he was getting a little bit better, but then he was administered too much chemo, and it turned into ALM leukemia, and his body could not handle it. Doctor felt very badly about it. But I was making a sandwich, and Ezra was okay enough to, he was still living at home, and he was okay to make his sandwich himself. And I made a nice sandwich for myself. It was, I don't, it was way after supper time. And he goes, "Oh, Dad, make me a sandwich." And I said, "Make yourself a sandwich." And I always, it's the thing that sticks with me,
Mm.
that I always wished I made him a sandwich. That it's the thing that I feel, now he'd forget about it, but I feel that I did wrong, because, and they're little things that remind you, you can never do enough for your children. You want to give them the world, but the fact is, you can never give them enough, because you're not supposed to in the first place. And but you can always give them more than enough love. And are we done? Or,
Thank you so much, Mark. I think that's just a very beautiful way to end it, that it is natural for us to go back into our memory banks after we've lost someone and said, I wish I had, or I wish I hadn't, or I wish. But the truth is, we can then channel all of those regrets
right,
into paying it forward
right,
and use that energy instead of blaming ourselves and pointless recrimination, to use that energy instead to say, well, then I'm going to pay it forward today. I'm going to smile at that stranger. I'm going to give that person, put a little bit of money in their cup. I'm going to give that person, I can donate my time here, donate that energy there, because life is filled with things we wish we had done differently. Hindsight is 2020 sometimes. But what we can do when it comes to grief, when it comes to loss of whatever the loss is to learn from it. And as you say, there are times in our lives where we wish we made someone a sandwich. We
yep.
wish we had given that hug. We wish we had reached out just one more time. And I think we can use all of that just to do a little bit better today, just a little bit better tomorrow, and to forgive ourselves because we're just imperfect humans after all.
I love you, Carla.
I love you. And
Wish,
thank you for sharing your time with me, with us today. It has been a true joy, a pleasure, and an honor. And our
thank
listeners,
you so much for having.
thank
I,
you. And our listeners, Mark, they can find you. I have your website. It is markedauthor.com,
markedauthor.com.
and they can find your music there. They can find your book on grief. They can find your beautiful presence, your beautiful energy. And I thank you again. And listeners, I thank you for walking through this not easy journey with us today. This was a big one. So thank you. I hope it has blessed your life and your heart in some way. Thanks again. And this is Imperfect Love.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Remember, you have the power to transform your life and love fearlessly, if imperfectly. and it's my privilege to help you along the way. You can find more life-changing content, including my books and other podcast episodes, at drcarlamanley.com. Feel free to submit your own confidential questions through my website. I'll do my very best to include your issue on a future episode. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Until we connect again, this is Dr. Carla Marie Manley wishing you oceans of blessings and love. Please note, this podcast is psychoeducational in nature and is not intended to replace formal mental health support. Please contact your healthcare provider or emergency hotline if you need psychiatric care. And as always, please take good care of your amazing, wonderful self.